our beloved Reverend Terry or Shea, and he's probably got something really good prepared. So I'm excited to hear what Reverend Terry's got in store for us.
I know. I promised Reverend Tamara that I would not say anything to offend anyone today. Let's see how that works. The title of the talk is really uninspiring. It is self-actualization. I intend to move on from a somewhat uninspiring title to something more expansive and exciting. I did a wedding yesterday. The couple had asked me to do the wedding about a year ago, and then they had to call me and cancel because they wanted the wedding to be on their boat, and the boat was not built yet. And so it was happening, but it was just happening a lot slower than they had anticipated. And so a year later, they finally got in touch with me and said, the boat is built, and could you schedule the wedding for the 25th of May? And I said, happily, I would. Then, having met with them and talked with them a little bit, I started thinking, okay, how am I going to do this? Because I knew their boat was so very important to them. So I went online and I tried to find inspiring things about love and boats. And all I found was really either super sappy stuff that was just like so saccharine I was getting a diabetic attack just reading it, or really, really rude things, that sailors would say. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to have to look further afield. But here we were standing on the forepeak of their boat, and the groom is here, the bride is here, I'm here, and their two children from a previous marriage are there in front of us. That's it. Oh, and a son-in-law. That's it. And so I said, this is what I want to say to you today. I've searched everywhere, but this is the only thing that I can find that makes sense. It comes from that very high-minded Roman, Brutus, from the play Julius Caesar. And Brutus says, there is a tide in the affairs of men. And I've suddenly forgot it. Tide in the affairs of men, which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and in miseries. On such a full sea are we now afloat. We must take the current as it serves, or lose our ventures. Right? Right on. Eamon knew it. I considered this was a real coup for me because as I looked over at the groom, the tears were streaming down his face. And I had this time to say to both of them, they were in their 50s. I said, this is that time when what you have looked for is coming to fruition. But it's coming to fruition not as the destination, but as the beginning of a new journey. When I was preparing for this talk today, I looked up self-realization or self-actualization. And here's what I found. It is a state of mind characterized by acceptance and understanding. Self-actualization is the realization of one's full potential as a human being. The realization of one's full potential as a human being. I'm bilingual, and so I can appreciate the subtleties of English and French, and I can especially appreciate the fact that and this is interesting, the average educated French person speaks 50,000 more words than the average English person. That's the other francophone in the room. And that is a significant number. And one would ask, well, why is that? And it's because the French have more words than we do. They have subtleties of understanding of language that do not exist in English. It's one of the reasons why the language of diplomacy, until the end of the First World War, all treaties were written in French, because there was no wiggle room. And so this word realization, which is very much a part of New Thought, and in particular it is the third step of spiritual mind treatment, has this really important significance, this real precision. Let me see if I can reach it. In French, when you realize something, you say, "Je me rends compte que." And that means basically, I can account for the fact that, right? I can account for the fact that I am 77 years old, or soon to be. Je me rends compte que, right? I can account for that. But that is very different than when a French person says, "Je réalise." To realize in French, "je réalise," means to make something real. And when Ernest Holmes used that word in the 20s when he was evolving science of mind, he meant very clearly the idea of making something real. So when we say that self-actualization is a realization of our full potential as a human being, what we're actually saying is that full potential of humanness that we are is being made real in our expression and our experience every day. And that is a conscious act. That's something that we consciously engage in. Now, I say all of this because I want to read what was the next thing in the definition. So remember where we left off, full potential of human being. Most people are working at more pressing needs. Most people are working at more pressing needs than realizing their full potential as a human being. Now, I couldn't help asking myself, what is more pressing than realizing your full potential as a human being? This whole theory of self-actualization, and it is a theory, a psychological theory, is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it is an aspect of the very top of the pyramid, which is the need for meaning. And let's keep that in mind, that self-actualization is about meaning. It is about the meaning that we give our lives. It is about the meaning that we derive from the life that we are living. All of the other things below, survival needs, being fed, have something to eat, something to drink, have a place to live, have a place where we belong, a community where we feel we're part of something, to have a sense of esteem for ourselves and for others. Those are all the needs that are below meaning and self-actualization. What I think the author of this definition was missing was that we don't take care of all of those other things and then decide, okay, now it's time for me to work on being a fully human being. As a matter of fact, all of those other things, searching for food and water, finding a place to live, finding a community that we belong to, those are how we self-actualize. That is the very process itself. We don't push self-actualization until we have time to do it, or until we have nothing else to worry about. The worrying about it takes place while we are trying to feed ourselves, house ourselves, find a community that we feel part of, where we learn how to interact with one another from a place of comfort, esteem, respect, and kindness. Can you imagine, and perhaps you don't have to think about it too hard, what it is like to live in a world where realizing one's full potential as a human being is being shunted aside, where our preoccupations are more about all that other stuff. Liv, your poem was so perfect for today because it really speaks to that idea of going to the root of who and what we are and not getting caught up in all of the other stuff that is so very essential, but that is not our preoccupation. It is not what we are here to be concerned with primarily. And so back to my wedding couple. They had a sense of what their life means and what their future was going to be about. They had in their mind meaning. All I did was articulate that meaning for them. Give it a form, give it words. And the groom's reaction to me articulating the meaning that was resident in him, but he didn't have the words for, brought him to tears. We are the only creature that we know of that creates and craves meaning. Our lives are about not making meaning as much as finding the meaning that is in there and bringing it forward. That's what you're doing here, really. That's the purpose of this community. That's the purpose of the person next to you, is to assist you in coming to revealing that meaning that your life has, that perhaps they can bring out. They perhaps have the word today, or the thought, or the gesture, or the poem that gives you access to that meaning that is already in there. This is the book I'm reading right now. I don't want to scare you. The Mystical Theology of the Eastern Church by Vladimir Lossky. It's a how can I say it? It is a giant of Eastern Orthodoxy, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that because Liv gave me permission. Too bad, huh? The understanding of what our life is about is behind a veil. And the veil is what we call God. And that veil is something that we create so that we can somehow understand that which is unknowable. And back of the veil is what is the uncreated. The God that is nameless, formless, shapeless, personalityless, that energy that is the source of all that is. But it is so unknown and so unknowable in Orthodoxy and Eastern Orthodox thought that we have put up something that we can look at and go, yeah, that's God. I was commenting on something on Facebook recently, and it was a beautiful quote from Einstein. And I commented on it by saying it's a wonderful quote and I really like it. I probably would not describe it as God, but as the good. And somebody messaged me back, as people do on social media. So, I see you don't believe in God. You probably don't believe in the Bible either. And I said, well, I don't know. Then I responded. I don't know where you got the idea I don't believe in God. I very much believe in God. But probably not the one you believe in. And as far as believing in the Bible, of course I believe in the Bible. To say that I don't believe in the Bible would be tantamount to saying I don't believe in the Constitution of the United States. They're documents. They're there. They're real. So, but I bet I don't look at that the same way either. And you see, this is the beautiful thing about God that we've created. The God that we have created that is that. What did I call it? Veil. We are constantly being challenged to step behind it, to go beyond the veil, to go beyond the veil, to get to the uncreated, to get to being, not a being, but being itself. Here's what Losky says. When God created Adam, and I know it's a story, I'm not saying it's fact, I'm just saying it's a myth, it's a story. When God created Adam, he designed the human being to be the synthesis of the uncreated and the created. And that Adam was to carry that synthesis within his body. Does that make sense? The uncreated and the created synthesized in one being. That's the story. Adam, however, was fascinated by creation. I saw a great cartoon the other day. It was God in his robe and his long beard and everything hanging out, and with a young kind of dude, and they both had, they were playing video games. They both had Xbox controllers, right? And they're both there and so on, and Adam says, "Can we create Eve soon?" Adam got seduced by the created. So seduced by the created that he actually turned his back on the uncreated. He got so entranced by non-being that he lost sight of absolute being. Now, we are living in the Adamic history. We're living in the history where that tension still exists in us. In every single one of us is that tension to live from the uncreated, to live from the divine in the world, in the world. Ernest Holmes says, we are creatures of the absolute who are constrained to live in the world of the relative. Now, it's a challenge. There's no doubt about it. It is a challenge to move forward constantly in this process of self-actualization. Why? Well, because there are 10 characteristics of the self-actualized person. So I encourage you to just do a mental note as we go through. I'll do the same, by the way. as you go through the 10 things, and just check off how many of them apply to you. And by the way, you don't have to own up to it at the end of this. So, here we go. They like to have peak experiences that change them. They practice ongoing appreciation. They live with acceptance, with no inhibition and free of guilt. Catholics in the room, you are disqualified. Okay. They are realistic. They practice ethics and responsibility. They are problem solvers. They are independent, non-conforming, living in their own moment. Okay, I'll cop to that one. They enjoy privacy and solitude and their own company. They are spontaneous. They have a sense of purpose. And they focus on the journey and not the destination. That's quite a shopping list. I don't know how many you came up with. I know that I've flirted with all of them. Can't say I've ever mastered probably any of them. When I was teaching moral philosophy, I hit upon the work of a writer, teacher. She was at the time professor of humanities at Brown University. And she had written a book called The Fragility of Goodness. Her name is Martha Nussbaum. And she was interviewed by Bill Moyers in his series that some of you may remember, The World of Ideas. And I just watched that episode last night at 3 a.m. and refreshed in my memory Martha Nussbaum's thoughts on the fragility of goodness. So I used that book for my course because it really spoke to me about what I'm talking to you about today, about the difficulty and the challenge of becoming self-actualized. Because really, that's all of those 10 things that I mentioned. They really are expressions of goodness. That essential goodness that we are. And she said something so charming, I've never forgotten it. She said, I wake up sometimes in the middle of the night thinking about Hecuba. I don't know if you know who Hecuba is, but Aeschylus Hecuba was the queen of Troy. And after the Battle of Troy, she had lost her husband, she had lost all of her children but one, she had lost her kingdom, she lost everything except this one child that she had. And she entrusted her child and the little money that she still had to her friend, knowing that the friend would protect and love that child. One day she was walking along the beach and she saw a dead body washed up on the shore, naked and obviously not very pretty. And she walked over and she realized that the body was the body of her child. And in that moment she realized that her friend had betrayed her, had taken the money that she had given, and had murdered her child, and had not even done the rites of burial, but just tossed the child into the ocean. And she found this child, and it says in the play that she became unhinged from her humanity in that moment. And at the end of the play, the chorus says that she was turned into a dog. And the dog was the lowest member of society, so to speak, definitely looked down upon. And so what the chorus was saying was that she was so undone by this that she had lost her humanity. The Greek tragedies grappled with this idea of what is it that we must do, or what is it that is in us that must be encouraged if we are to be fully human beings. And Nussbaum's book is about the fragility of that thing that we must be. That our goodness is something that is in us that must be nurtured like a plant, like a flower, something that is by its very nature tender and vulnerable, and must be. Lost his attention. Must be fragile. It cannot be hard like a jewel. It must be moved by life. My thought around this is that these values that are part of our self-actualization, they are within us in a way that is very tender and vulnerable. It is not something that we get to put on. We don't adopt values. We don't adopt kindness or compassion or care or courage. These are not things that we go out and get. We have made our lives really very much about what we do go out and get. But we forget that those things are in us. They are what we are. We're not going out to be more human. We're going out to reveal more of our humanity. And that has to be done by struggle, by the challenges of life that we're often facing with really not much sense of what that's about. Our humanity is born in the pain and struggle. It is not born in the triumphs. When I was in context training a number of years ago, I went to a program called Mastery. And we were encouraged in that program to come up with a life question. And I leave you with this today because I'm going to ask you to, as you leave this place today and as you move into your life for the week, to think about what a life question for you might look like. In other words, is there a question in you that is seeking to be answered with your life? Is there something in you that wants to speak itself into being? Perhaps it has already. Perhaps it's fully formed in you. And all it needs now at this time is for you to continue giving to that question. But if you don't have it, or if you're questioning whether you have it, I encourage you, please, this week, think about it. So we spent an entire weekend, well actually 4 days, and at the end of it we had to say to the group what our question, what our life question is. Now I'm going to tell you that growing up in the 50s as a young Catholic boy, and knowing that I was gay, I didn't feel really very much of a gift to my family, my church, my life. And when I got this question while I was on this mastery retreat, I was shocked. I was truly, truly shocked that I got this question. I also need to let you know that immediately after finishing that program, I joined ministerial school. And here was my life question. How can I now best manifest the gift that I am to my community? Those of you who know me know that I'm still asking that question. That question still fires me up inside to be more than I've ever been. To not go into my senior years, and there's nothing wrong with playing golf, but just thinking that my life is about playing golf and hanging out and having coffee with my friends. I am still troubled by this question. Troubled and encouraged and challenged. If I said anything that triggered anyone today, I'm going to say that again. If I've said anything that triggered anyone today, you can thank me later. You see, I've come to this place of realizing that those people who are triggering me deserve a high five. Because what they're doing is they're saying, Terry, take a look at what you think, what you feel, and what you believe. Take a long look at it and see whether it's really worth the energy you're putting into it. And so I think that's all I've got for you this morning. Thank you. Namaste.